I'm gonna take you through our dynamic warm-up, first starting in a half kneel position, okay? We're gonna have a couple different purposes in this. First, stretching the hip flexor of the grounded leg, and it also working on our mobility of the tibia on the non-grounded leg, or I guess the non-kneeling side. So I want you to make sure your hips are tucked underneath you, like you're tucking your butt cheeks toward the backs of your knees. And that's going to keep your hips in neutral alignment as you then push your hips forward and stretch that hip flexor. So hips tucked under you, push hips forward, and then I take my hands on my upper knee here and push slightly forward. You'll feel a little bit of pressure on the tibia here, which is the lower part of the shin, but no pain, right? So we're not pushing that hard. Working on that tibia mobility, and that's going to be helpful in our lower body movements. Okay. From there, we're going to work into hip circles. So you bring your torso down. I put my hands right in front of my kneeling leg. And you bring your bent knee into outer circles here. You go for about 10 or 12 circles going laterally. Okay. Have a funny looking movement here, but loosening up the hip joint basically before we get into split squats, goblet squats, anything like that. And then from there, I kind of slide that foot forward and do a little bit of a hamstring stretch, nothing crazy. I even teeter forward, backward just a little bit, making it a dynamic type movement, not static stretching, but dynamic. And then we're going to switch sides here. So kneeling opposite side, hips in neutral alignment. Bring the hips forward to stretch that quadricep and hip flexor. Pushing this knee slightly forward, no pain, just a little bit of pressure here. You're keeping your heel grounded, right? We're not letting it lift like that. We're keeping the heel down, so it is a stretch of the soleus, the lower part of the calf, and working on our tibia mobility here. So hip flexor, tibia, and then we're going to work into our hip circles. Go for about 10 or 12 circles laterally. You can do medial circles as well if you want. Frankly, as long as you're doing hip circles, I'm happy. A little bit of hamstring pulsing here. Do some forward, backward. So from here, forward, backward. There's no precise way to do this. Dynamic warm-ups, you can kind of adapt as you need, but these are the general movements. We're going to go into a cat-cow. So rounded position and pushing those palms down into the floor. So you should hollow out your torso here. I'm going to use that term a lot, the hollowing out. And when I hollow out and push my arms directly forward into the floor, I pull my breath in to my back and my pelvis, almost like a big beach ball. I'm inflating that pelvic floor, that whole lower abdominal area with my breath intake. And from there, I exhale and bow down my torso. Inhale and hollow out. Push the palms forward and flat, even the index fingers, keep them flat on the floor. Exhale and bow down. We'll do 2 more. Make sure you're not shrugging here, but you're just pushing directly forward into the floor. Exhale. And last. last one. And from here, we're gonna go right into bear hold. So I'm on my tiptoes, I'm hollowed out, my hips are tucked under me, and my knees are hovering just like a half inch off the floor, right? I'm not hiking up all the way here, but I get into that hollowed out position. I pull my breath into my pelvis, and then I just pop my knees up half an inch. I'm gonna go for 10 breaths. Every time I pull that breath in, it's going into the pelvic region and into the low back. 10 seconds or 10 slow breaths, whatever you're feeling. Don't shrug, punch forward, all set. Okay. So now I'm gonna go into a child's pose. It's a yoga move. You're just kind of sitting your hips back to your heels, arms are in front. We should feel a stretch in the lats, the area right underneath your armpit on both arms. And I'm just gonna rock laterally here. So we're feeling a little bit of a lat stretch alternating, kind of in a pulsing fashion. We're doing a lot of these movements for our dynamic warm-up. So focus on pulling the hip back of the side that you're rocking on. So I'm rocking on my left side, I'm pulling my left hip back, so I'm feeling that extra stretch in the left lat, and vice versa for the right. Just a handful of times each. From here, we're gonna go into a T-spine rotation, still sitting the hips back. We're kind of fanning out the knees here. One arm grounded, and just like our bear hold, right, I'm not sunken into my shoulder socket, but I'm punched into the floor. You see the difference there? No, yes, right? I'm not shrugging, I'm punching forward. That's our serratus anterior engagement here. Other arm up at the ear, rotate, and then inside. So we're gonna rotate laterally and medially. We're not forcing anything. That's a good way to slip a rib. Nobody wants that. But we're doing just gentle rotations. And watch yourself as you continue this, like, are you getting sucked up into your shoulder socket as you rotate medially? Still keep it punched forward, even as you're rotating in both directions. So we're going all the way out without forcing it, and then elbow to elbow. In the ballpark of 10 rotations. So we'll switch, right? Other arm punch, not here, but here. Arm up on the opposite side, rotate laterally, elbow to elbow. And yes, I'm still punched forward even as I rotate medially. So from the side, I'll keep going here so you can see what we're doing. Medial rotation. I'm keeping my whole palm grounded. The thumb and index finger like to pop up a lot, just like on your foot, your arch and your big toe like to pop up. We want to keep the insides of our palms and our feet grounded during our movements. All right, so next we're going to get into split squats. Taking off socks so I'm not slipping and sliding. Ideally you want to be wearing tennis shoes, but I'm using my shoes to hold the camera anyways. Keep those, the knee and the heel just a couple inches apart, so you're going to feel really cramped. That is okay. I'll show you why in a second. The working hip, you're going to pull it back and down, okay? So instead of up, it's going to be back and down. No, yes. That's going to turn on that glute to do the work. Push through the whole foot. And you can adjust from there and pull that back foot in just a little bit. This hip is still back and down, right? I didn't let it float up. I kept it packed down, and that's what uses the glute. Down and up. The middle part of my foot is grounded, the arch is down. I'm hollowed out in my spine, like I'm not arcing or falling forward. I'm hollowed out and the hip is back and down. Do a couple more reps here, in the ballpark of 10 per leg. And last one, hip back and down, and switch sides here. So I'll go from the front this time. I get in position down, and then I rise up. So knee and heel just a couple inches apart. We're not like all spread out here. This hip back and down. So I turn that glute on. I'm hollowed out in the hips and the torso. Check yourself at the top. Are you still back and down with the hip? Good. So scrunched together with those legs is okay. It keeps you from hyperextending that back, right? That's why we don't want to be super spread apart. Okay. Going for about 10 reps here. Just switching angles so you can see. Hip is back and down. Now I'll do one more. Awesome. All right, from here we're going into push-up. I suggest everybody does a modified push-up in that they have their knees down on the ground. I would normally have a mat here, but I forgot it. So make sure you have a mat so you're not destroying your knees like I am. Classic push-up, so hands are about shoulder width. Index fingers are forward, not out, not in, right there. Torso is going to be hollowed out, right? So we're not going to be here, we're going to be here. Elbows fan back at a 45-degree angle. Like so. We're going to go for about 10 reps here. Make sure you're not shrugging your shoulders, but you're packing them down and keeping your abs engaged so that you're not falling into that hyperextended position, but instead keeping a hollowed out torso. All right. 2 more movements here. Single arm overhead wall reach. So you're going to find a wall, stand maybe about a foot away from it. Elbows are against the wall, as are your forearms. You're going to hollow out your torso, so you're not reaching or arcing your back, but you're pulling your hips down, tucking your butt cheeks towards your heels. You have soft knees, right? You're not hyperextending your knees. So all in all, we're in what I call an athletic position here. You'll find yourself in that position in many exercises we do. Punch those elbows forward, just like we punched our hands into the floor for bear hold. Pull your breath down into your pelvic floor and your low back. And one of your arms, we'll start with the right, keep pushing it forward into the wall, but we're also pushing it up, aiming not to only shrug, but actually using that serratus anterior to push the arm forward and up. I don't like to think in all or none terms, so I'm not saying you're not going to shrug your shoulder a little bit, but often we don't engage that serratus anterior enough to assist in our overhead positions. speaking from experience because I'm awful at engaging it, so I still work to it to this day. So yes, you will shrug your shoulder a little bit in an overhead, but we want to also engage serratus anterior, our boxing muscle that punches our arm forward and actually keeps our shoulder in a healthy position. So it's a joint effort. That's what this movement practices. So once you get your arm in an overhead position where you feel like it's a dual use between the trapezius, which is the shrug, as well as the serratus anterior. Once you feel like you're engaging both of those mechanisms, we're going to hold and just breathe. And keep track for those 10 breaths we're going to do. Are you starting to creep up into a shrug? Pull it down, hollow out the torso, and punch the arm forward against that wall. So I'll hold for a few more breaths here. Check your non-working arm as well as it's still punched forward into the wall. And we'll switch. So I'll show from the back angle as well, hopefully. I know this isn't the best angle, but basically you're just bringing your arm overhead without shrugging too much. Both arms are pushing forward, even the down arm. Once you get into that healthy overhead position where you're not too shrugged, you're engaging that serratus, you're going to hold for 10 breaths. When you're doing this, just pretend I'm still holding. Make sure your torso isn't caving forward. You're going to tuck your ribs down to keep that hollowed out position. That's why we use our abs. We pull the rib cage down to maintain this position here. For a few more breaths. Reach tall and forward into the wall. Last breath into that pelvis and low back. Awesome. Finally, we're going to end with goblet squats here. I got my laundry detergent or whatever household object you would like, or a kettlebell or a dumbbell. Anything like, bag of sand, a book bag, books would be totally sufficient here. I'll show you that 45-degree angle, hips tucked under you. Engaging glutes, pushing your knees forward. If you struggle with these, like I do, you're going to find your torso dive bombs forward. That's why we want to work on our tibia mobility, among other things such as hip mobility and glute engagement, to avoid dive bombing forward, but instead keeping that torso upright and letting the knees trail forward. Almost as if you were holding the object here and just dropping that in your hips right in between your ankles. Go for a couple more. When you come back up, we're not here, right? Hips are tucked under you, that's how you use your glutes, and knees are soft. And then use glutes to come back up to neutral. That's our dynamic warm-up. It won't normally take that long, obviously, because I talked you through a bunch. But essentially the movements are half kneel with the hip flexor and tibia mobility, working into hip circles, and then hamstring stretch, kind of pulsing forward, backward, followed by cat-cow breathing, bear hold, child pose with the lat stretch, pulsing left and right, T-spine rotation, split squats, each leg, obviously, push-ups, modified, hollowed out. I'm not looking for like normal push-ups, I'm looking for modified so you can really focus on the torso hollowed out. That's what I care about on that one. the single arm overhead wall reach for each arm, and then goblet squat, and you are good to go.